There is a feeling that many people over 60 know deeply. It's not a pain that gets brought to a doctor. It doesn't show up in a blood test. It doesn't have a name in the medical record. Doesn't generate any alarm at routine appointments. Doesn't produce any external sign that would justify a formal conversation about what's happening. It's interior. It's silent. And for those who know it, it is one of the most disorienting experiences that exist. You wake up in the morning, the body wakes, the eyes open, you're physically present in your bed, in your room, at the beginning of another day. But the mind didn't wake up with you. It's somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, covered by a fog that doesn't lift quickly enough. Thoughts arrive slowly, as if they have to pass through some invisible resistance before becoming clear. The mental organization that used to be automatic, planning the day, remembering tasks, the agility of reasoning seems to require an effort that didn't exist before, and you wait. You wait for the coffee to kick in. You wait for the fog to pass. You wait for the mind to finally truly come online. Sometimes it takes an hour. Sometimes the fog never fully clears. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, you begin to normalize this state, to accept that waking up with a slow mind is simply how mornings are now. But it shouldn't be, because what that fog represents is not simply the natural result of having more years of life. In many cases, it is a signal, a communication from the brain, clear, consistent, and frequently ignored, that something in the environment created for it is not working as it should. It's not just forgetting where you put something. That inconvenience is real, but bearable. What weighs more heavily is the experience of trying to reason and feeling the mind resist, of searching for a simple word, a word you've used 1,000 times and having it simply not come, of looking at a common task, something you did automatically for decades, and realizing it requires more time, more effort, more concentration than before to complete. It's the frustrating and intimate feeling of no longer feeling like yourself, and alongside it comes something people rarely admit openly, even to themselves. The silent question that surfaces in the moments of densest fog: is this going to keep getting worse? That question carries a weight that goes far beyond memory or focus. It carries the fear of a trajectory, of a direction, of a future where the fog keeps thickening. The forgetting becomes more frequent, the dependence more present. Many accept that fear as inevitable, just as they accept brain fog, difficulty focusing, and mental sluggishness as a given destination, a consequence with no alternative path. But what modern neuroscience has discovered changes that view completely. The brain continues to be demanding at any age. That is the first truth that needs to be clearly established. The brain doesn't reach a certain age and reduce its requirements. It doesn't settle for less nutrition, less sleep, less support, simply because you have more years. On the contrary, as time passes, its ability to compensate for deficiencies diminishes. Its tolerance margin for inadequate conditions narrows. The impacts of choices that previously went unnoticed become more visible, faster, harder to ignore. It needs the right fuel, not the artificial energy spike that coffee offers for a few hours, but real nutrients that sustain neural function throughout the entire day. It needs deep rest, not just hours lying down, but complete sleep cycles that include the phases where genuine neural recovery happens. It needs daily protection against the processes that progressively compromise its function: inflammation, oxidative stress, glycemic instability, accumulated nutritional deficiencies. When that support is present, the difference is perceptible. When it's absent, the brain communicates the absence the only way it can, through the symptoms we're describing: morning mental fog, slow reasoning, the word that won't come, the task that demands too much effort, the memory that fails at the wrong moments. These aren't signs of a brain that's giving out. They're signs of a brain operating without the support it needs, and support can be provided. That's when something specific began drawing the attention of researchers and brain health specialists. Not an expensive supplement, not a complex protocol requiring specialized supervision, not an intervention demanding radical lifestyle transformation. A small food, accessible, found in any grocery store for a few dollars, that most people either completely ignore or use randomly without understanding what it can offer when consumed at the right moment and in the right amount: sunflower seeds. And what makes this specific food relevant for brain health, especially when consumed at night, approximately 1 hour before sleep, is directly related to something most people have never stopped to think about regarding how the brain functions at night. It was exactly from the compounds identified in these seeds that researchers developed a new understanding of how to support nightly brain recovery in a simple and accessible way. You'll find it at the first link in the description. There is a fundamental misconception most people have about when the brain's most important work happens. The assumption is that the brain works during the day, processing information, making decisions, sustaining attention, managing emotions, and rests at night. The reality is the opposite. During the day, the brain executes. At night, it rebuilds itself. And the quality of that nightly rebuilding is what determines, to a large extent, with what clarity, speed, and reliability the brain will function the following day and across the years. The first nightly process is memory consolidation. During sleep, especially during slow sleep and REM sleep, the brain actively processes the information received throughout the day. It decides what to transfer to long-term memory and what to discard. It strengthens the synaptic connections associated with important learning. It integrates new information with existing knowledge in ways that are not possible during the waking state. When this process is interrupted by superficial sleep, by frequent waking during the night, by not completing the necessary cycles, memory isn't adequately formed. What seems like forgetting is often simply information that was never adequately recorded. The second process is glymphatic cleaning. The brain's glymphatic system, a network of channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels, operates primarily during deep sleep, circulating cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue and removing metabolic waste accumulated throughout the day. That waste includes proteins like amyloid beta, whose progressive accumulation is strongly associated with cognitive decline. Every night of adequate sleep is a night when that cleaning happens completely. Every night of poor sleep is a night the residues remain and accumulate. The third process is hormonal and neurochemical regulation. During deep sleep, the body secretes growth hormone, which participates in the recovery and repair of neural tissue. It regulates cortisol, whose chronically elevated levels are directly toxic to the hippocampus, the brain region most critical for forming new memories. It produces and balances neurotransmitters that affect mood, energy, and cognitive capacity the following day. And melatonin, beyond regulating sleep cycles, exerts direct antioxidant effects on brain tissue, protecting neurons from oxidative damage during the nighttime period. When these three processes function well, the result is waking up with a clear mind, with the fog absent or minimal, with accessible memory, with the cognitive energy that makes the day genuinely functional. When they are systematically compromised by poor sleep quality, by deficiency in the nutrients that support them, by stress that prevents entry into deep phases, the cycle of stimulant dependence installs itself. You wake up tired, you drink coffee to function. The coffee elevates cortisol. The cortisol fragments the next night's sleep, and the fog gets progressively denser over time. Sunflower seeds enter exactly into this nighttime equation. Let's talk about why this specific seed, and not just any food, makes sense as a nightly cognitive support. The first critical compound is vitamin E. Sunflower seeds are one of the most concentrated dietary sources of vitamin E available. A 30-gram serving provides more than 7 milligrams of vitamin E, a significant contribution to the recommended daily intake. And vitamin E matters for the brain in a very specific way. The brain, due to its extremely high oxygen consumption, approximately 20% of all the oxygen you breathe, despite representing less than 2% of body weight, is extraordinarily vulnerable to oxidative stress. Free radicals generated by intense brain metabolism can damage neural membranes, compromise synaptic efficiency, and contribute to progressive cognitive decline. Vitamin E is one of the most important fat-soluble antioxidants for protecting neural membranes, precisely because it integrates into cell membranes and protects them from oxidative damage from the inside out. Studies associate adequate vitamin E levels with lower risk of cognitive decline and greater preservation of neurological function across aging. The second compound is magnesium. Magnesium participates in more than 300 biochemical reactions in the body, and a disproportionate number of them involve the central nervous system. For sleep specifically, it plays a fundamental role. It regulates parasympathetic nervous system activity, facilitates entry into the deep phases of sleep, and participates in GABA synthesis, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter that creates the state of neural calm necessary for restorative sleep. For cognition, it regulates NMDA receptors, critical structures for synaptic plasticity and memory consolidation. Studies show that adequate magnesium levels are associated with greater synaptic density in the hippocampus, the brain region most directly linked to the formation of new memories. A significant percentage of the population over 60 has magnesium deficiency, frequently without obvious symptoms, manifesting subtly as poor quality sleep, irritability, mental fatigue, and compromised cognitive function. Sunflower seeds are a significant and bioavailable source of this mineral. The third compound is selenium. Selenium is a micromineral with specific antioxidant and anti-inflammatory functions in brain tissue. It is a cofactor of glutathione peroxidase, one of the body's most important antioxidant enzymes, responsible for neutralizing lipid peroxidations that damage neural membranes. Epidemiological studies show correlation between adequate selenium levels and lower incidence of cognitive decline in older populations. And sunflower seeds are one of the most concentrated dietary sources of this mineral. The fourth element is healthy fats, especially unsaturated fatty acids. The brain is composed of approximately 60% fat. Neuron membranes are formed largely by polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the fluidity of those membranes, which directly influences the speed and efficiency of synaptic transmission, depends on the continuous supply of these fatty acids through the diet. When the diet is chronically poor in healthy fats, neural membranes progressively become less fluid, less efficient, less responsive, and this directly contributes to that slowness of thought, that difficulty accessing memories, that increased response time that people frequently attribute simply to age. Sunflower seeds are rich in linoleic acid and other unsaturated fatty acids that support this structural maintenance of neural membranes. And the fifth compound is the phytosterols, and anti-inflammatory compounds present in the seeds. Low-grade chronic inflammation, that silent state of immune alert that inadequate diet, stress, and sedentary living sustain over time, is one of the factors most consistently associated with cognitive decline in the most recent research. The phytosterols in sunflower seeds contribute to the modulation of that inflammatory state, progressively creating a more favorable internal environment for brain function. If you want to start this process today, what researchers have isolated about this nighttime sunflower seed protocol and how to implement it practically is available at the first link in the description. As simple as it always should have been, but there is an emotional part of this story that almost nobody talks about openly, and it needs to be told, because the impact of brain fog and memory lapses isn't just cognitive, it's deeply personal, deeply tied to identity, and deeply social. Difficulty focusing begins affecting tasks that used to be simple. You start something and forget it in the middle. You lose the thread of a conversation you were following well. You need to reread the same paragraph 3 times to absorb what it says. You go to get something with a clear purpose and arrive there without remembering what the purpose was. And each of these moments, individually, seem small, but what they build accumulated across days, weeks, months, is an erosion of self-confidence that is difficult to name and even harder to reverse without understanding what's behind it. You start hesitating before speaking, mentally checking whether what you're about to say has already been said, watching the expressions of the people around you for signs that you repeated something, and finding those signs with a frequency you'd rather not find, telling the same story twice, noticing the strange silence afterward, seeing the exchanged glances, feeling that wave of embarrassment that nobody around you mentions but that you felt completely. This doesn't define anyone, and it isn't a verdict. In many cases, perhaps most cases, it's simply the brain communicating that it's operating with insufficient resources, that the nightly recovery isn't being complete, that the building blocks it needs to adequately consolidate memories, to maintain attention with its previous efficiency, to function with the clarity that is possible, are missing. And when you provide those resources consistently, at the right time, with the right compounds, the system responds. There is a property of the brain that neuroscience has established with increasing clarity in recent decades, and that contradicts the inevitability narrative that so many people embrace about cognitive aging, neuroplasticity. The adult brain, even the aging brain, even the brain of someone in their 70s, 80s retains the capacity to create new synaptic connections, reorganize neural roots, and respond positively to adequate stimulation, not at the speed of childhood, not with the ease of someone in their 20s, but in a real, documented, neuroimaging measurable way. And what that means in practice is that the conditions you create for your brain today, the habits you start building now, the nutrition you begin providing, the sleep quality you start prioritizing, have the capacity to influence the cognitive trajectory you'll experience in the coming years. This isn't empty motivation, it's biology. A simple routine, practiced with consistency, can be worth more than any expensive and complex solution. 10 grams of sunflower seeds about 1 hour before sleep, chewed directly, lightly ground, added to a small glass of warm milk or a spoonful of honey. No exaggeration, no complication. Combined with a light dinner, reduction of screens in the hours before sleep, a consistent sleep and wake schedule, this small gesture repeated night after night creates the environment the nervous system needs to perform the recovery processes that determine how you wake up. And what people describe consistently when they begin implementing this kind of nightly support is remarkably specific. Morning fog begins to be less dense. That sluggishness of the first hours, which had become so familiar you stopped questioning it, begins to shorten. You wake up with your mind in a slightly more active state, slightly more accessible, slightly more resembling what it used to be. Over time, focus improves. Memory for daily details where things were put, what was said in recent conversations, tasks that need doing becomes more reliable. The need for coffee to turn on gradually diminishes, because the brain is waking up in a state of more complete recovery, not overnight transformation. Progressive reconstruction, and progressive is more powerful because it's built on real changes in the underlying systems, not on artificial stimulation that lasts only while the compound is active. Mental clarity doesn't come from a rushed cup of coffee at 6 in the morning. It begins in how you prepare your brain the night before. That distinction seems simple, and it is, but it completely inverts the logic with which most people approach cognitive health. Instead of trying to compensate in the morning for what was missing at night, you invest at night, so that the morning is genuinely different. And when that nightly investment is consistent, when the right compounds are available at the right time, when sleep receives the attention it deserves as a health priority, when nightly recovery is treated as the most critical period for brain health, the difference begins to appear in ways that go far beyond what any morning stimulant could produce. Aging doesn't have to mean living in permanent mental fog. Doesn't have to mean living with constant distraction, involuntarily repeated stories, that growing sense that the mind is falling behind. The brain can keep responding, can keep recovering, can keep being a reliable ally in conversations, in decisions, in the moments that define who you are, as long as it receives what it needs, as long as sleep is taken seriously, as long as the right nutrients are available at the right time. The complete method is in the pinned comment. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. In the upcoming videos, I'll keep showing you natural and intelligent strategies to recover focus, strengthen memory, and feel in control of your own mind again after 60. Perhaps the answer isn't in one more cup of coffee at 6 in the morning. Perhaps it's in something small, simple, and forgotten by many, used the right way, at the right moment, with an understanding of why it works. A small seed, 1 hour before sleep, repeated with consistency, and the brain, when it receives what it needs to truly recover during the night, wakes up differently, clearer, more present, more like it always was.